Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, we're going to be doing part 3 in our series of holiday hacks for this 2022 holiday season, talking about the article that we posted a couple of days ago on qualities of successful leaders. If you haven't listened to part 1 and 2, go back and do so. But for part 3 today, we're going to be talking about how successful leaders focus on building relationships with people.
Definitely a hot topic and one that we've discussed quite frequently.
It is, and it might seem a little obvious, but building relationships is something that is an active thing. You don't build relationships passively. It doesn't just happen when you're talking about getting people to follow you if you are their leader. Building relationships passively and for the long term can work for acquaintances or friendships, and you don't really have to try hard to do that. They just kind of happen when they're supposed to happen. When it comes to people who you're expecting to, if you're expecting them to follow you as their leader, then building relationships with them needs to be a very active process, something that you focus on intentionally doing through your actions with them every single day.
Yeah, well, I think it's, we've talked about this before, but I think just being authentic to yourself, sharing who you are, being confident in, the things that naturally you not only enjoy doing, but how your natural curiosity of getting to know people, things like that. Like I know there are teams that I've led and people that I've led where being myself and kind of opening the doors of the things that are like hobbies to me or passions of mine, and engaging in conversation with different people about different types of things and being curious about their interests and their hobbies, like those, to your point, like those types of proactive conversations and dialogue kind of day in and day out and day in and day out, I think lead over time for people to start to open up about themselves, but also like get to know you and start to have other levels of dialogue that maybe are beyond the surface. And I think that it's, if you just walked around and said, "Hi, I'm the new leader," and you just shook everybody's hand or said hi or whatever the case is, and now we know each other. Now we have a professional relationship.
Yeah.
And I will talk to you approximately 8 minutes of every week, and I will discuss how are you doing today, and we'll move forward. Like if you're just like this robotic or the silly idea that just the action of working around people will build the relationship, that's not the case. I think that you will learn stuff about people, but truly building a relationship does take work, and it does take, in my belief, the leader to be the one to kind of lead, not only with the understanding of what makes people tick and what are they trying to accomplish and what's your responsibility as a leader, but also role modeling what building good professional relationships should look like.
I mean, let's be clear here. The impetus is on the leader for one reason only, and that's that the leader has more of a vested interest in there being a relationship with the people reporting up through them than the employee does. If the employees want to have relationships with their leaders in a way that would allow them to come and talk about problems they might be having, or where they can look for support on things they're going through, that would be ideal for the employee, but it's not necessary for the employee in order to just show up and do the basics. That is something that if the employee doesn't have, in a lot of cases, they'll try to find other places to work instead, or they'll find other leaders to work for. But where the leader has this responsibility is because the employees who have relationships with their leaders and vice versa are environments where people do their best work. They're environments where people actually put more thought and more effort and more creativity and more outside the box thinking into their day-to-day work. Because let's be clear, you're not going to do that for a person for whom you do not have a relationship. The people show up to work and they do the basics because they're getting a paycheck. If you want them to do, and I don't want to say above and beyond, because it's not above and beyond. It's just doing better work while they're there. It's just making sure that the outcomes are better, measurably better. Then you have to have a relationship with them so that you can pinpoint when you see the moments when things aren't going well for them, and reach out in advance and sit down and talk with them and try to figure out how you can step in and help solve problems they might be having if they're not going to reach out to you. These aren't things that you'll be able to pick up on people who you have 8 minutes of conversation with a week. They are things you'll only pick up on people that you can kind of like have a conversation with for 2 minutes and think as you're leaving that conversation, something seems off there. Really hard to do that with somebody unless you have a relationship with them, unless you're constantly talking with them and the communication is there both ways.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that, as I mentioned, you were kind of talking, is I think some of this is very much a learned behavior. I think in family and friends, building relationships, is a different thing than when you build relationships at work. So the question I have for you is, can you think of a person or a leader that had role modeled that for you in your career, that showed you, and maybe it was between them and you, on how to build an effective professional relationship that allowed you to get, the mentorship or inspiration or clarity of job expectations that you were looking for as an employee? But first, we have a couple of words from our sponsors. Okay, Chris, so the question is, thinking of your professional career, has there been any leader that maybe has stuck out to you that has really role modeled what it looks like to build a impactful and helpful professional relationship?
I mean, I've been very, very fortunate to have several like that. And the behaviors that I have seen are ones that led me to a moment where, like a moment of clarity or realization where I thought, wait a minute, this person just built a relationship with me, like one of those, you know what I'm talking about, like where you think like almost against your will, like you in your mind you're thinking this is not going to work right, or this person is not going to win me over. They're changing things up, they're doing things differently, and I want things to be the way they've always been, not this new way. And just over the conversations that I had with them, that they instigated with me, and that I had because I was just trying to be a nice person, right? Like I'm not going to tell them off, they're my boss, they're my leader. So I'm going to have a pleasant conversation with them. And the conversations, first of all, they aren't about work. They're not about work. They're about other things. And they don't start with just this question and answer like, how was your family this weekend? It starts with them sharing with me stuff about themselves and their family. So they're asking me to be a listener as opposed to like getting information, which is interesting because normally you think people want to, you say you want to be more of a listener and not let people talk and you be quiet. When you're a leader and you're building relationships, it's about trust, and they're not going to trust you with the information they have unless you have trusted them with the information you have first. And so the leaders that I've had the fortunate times of reporting to who do this well are ones who just start talking about their own personal lives to me, stuff that they're dealing with, issues they've been focusing on, good things that are happening in their life, things that they did with their family the previous weekend, and then eventually there's just almost this desire to share back. And eventually you kind of don't even realize that it's happening until it has already happened. It's really tough to kind of dig your heels in and not allow that to happen when it happens organically like that. And, I'm sure in some situations it really was organic and it was just their desire to have a conversation. But I'm positive there have been times when this happened very intentionally because these leaders know this is the right way to do things. And and they built a relationship with me because they wanted better performance out of me. They wanted my buy-in on whatever it was they were doing.
So just to be clear, that it wasn't like an episode of like Undercover Boss when it's just like, the boss was dressed up in like some type of silly outfit, and then they're just like,
yeah.
So tell me about yourself over a sandwich on a picnic table.
Yeah.
It's actual like like sharing of information, which I think is like I love that you kind of called that out, like the building of trust and the kind of the building of wanting to share things personally or things that you're thinking about, things you want to do. It's much easier when you feel that door is open, and I feel the same way. As I've had leaders that have opened that door for me just by sharing about what are they doing, or being very maybe not necessarily just transparent, but very, very humble in the moment, or very much just like instead of like, well, tell me about yourself, they're just kind of like, hey, it's great to meet you. I'd love to kind of, build a relationship, or I'm looking forward to doing this work together. Let me tell you a little bit about my life. And again, it kind of goes a little bit in the face of what most people will say to go do, which is go build a relationship and then tell me about yourself and then listen to that person talk about themselves. I think when you, as a leader, open that door first and say, like, let me tell you a little bit about myself, I think that's very helpful. It's one of the things that I've taken on over the years, that I realized that I do that, like, even in interviews now, especially with like external candidates or people that I
Sure.
don't know.
Yep.
I'm just like, hey, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking the time today. Really excited for this conversation. Would love to do a little bit of an intro. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. And then I share professionally, I share a little bit personally. I give them a little peek into the window of who I am or what my hobbies are. And I think that that's been really helpful, as they're like, oh, this is cool. Like, I can also share things that are important to me, or things that are priorities to me that are outside of the typical, here's the prepared intro statement that I like to make that you tend to get
Right.
sometimes. So I think that's been really, really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what you said about role modeling. Like you don't have to necessarily role model simply because you're looking to have a professional or personal relationship with this person for years and years. It could be that you just want the interview to go well, right? Like that you might never see them again. The interview will go better if you have done this to begin with. And so, yeah, these are important skills to have no matter what. The last thing I want to say on this is that, if you're a leader or if you want to be one, there will be people who report up to you who it will be difficult to do this for, because there isn't any obvious jumping off points. Let's say that a person reporting to you is of a different generation than you, combined with maybe a different skin color than you, combined with maybe like all these different things that would mean that you aren't necessarily surrounded by other people who are in this stage of life or this demographic as you all the time. And so there's less of an obvious jumping off point. That doesn't absolve you from the need to build a relationship. It just means you have to actually work harder at it. And sometimes it can actually mean calling out the elephant in the room, which is the lack of that jumping off point. And I've absolutely built relationships with people that started with me going up to them and saying, hey, I want to talk to you a little bit because I want to have a good relationship with you. I want you to know that I can solve problems that you have if you need help solving them. But I want to kind of like talk a little bit about myself, and I want to find out more about you, because eventually you will find something that is that jumping off point, that thing you have in common. We have so much more in common with people than we think we do. And if we just kind of limit it to the checkbox, the 10 checkboxes that we think are the things we look through. Oh, does this person have kids my kid's age? Do they live in the same neighborhood? Are they the same age approximately? All these things that we check off boxes. Oh, crud, we don't have any of these things in common. I guess there's no relationship. That is not acceptable. As a leader, if you need to make sure that every single person reporting up to you feels like they have a relationship in their own boss.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this holiday hack. This is Hacking Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.